Jake Morgan loved his ranch. It's nestled just beyond the quiet curve of the country road. The land stretched wide with rolling pastures, tall grasses swaying in the breeze, and a sparkling creek that traced its way through the property. For Jake, the ranch was more than just a place, which was a sanctuary. It was where he had grown up, learned the rhythms of nature, and found peace away from the busyness of town life. A particular feature of Jake's ranch was the wooden bridge that spanned the creek's small dam. The bridge wasn't new, it had been there for decades. Built by Jake's grandfather with sturdy beams and worn planks that creaked underfoot. To Jake, it was a symbol of continuity, connecting his family's past to the present. Every morning, he crossed that bridge on his way out to check on the cattle or tend to the garden, greeting the dawn as it spilled over the horizon. One crisp morning, Jake set out for his daily routine. The sky a pale blue, the sun just beginning to warm the earth. But when he approached the creek, he froze. The bridge was gone. Where the familiar wooden structure had stood, there was now only a bare, muddy bank. The beams were nowhere in sight. The pathway to the far side cut off entirely. Jake's heart sank. Confused, he looked around for any sign or note something to explain what had happened. Down the road, a group of workers packed up their tools beside a large truck. Jake walked over, raising his voice to catch the foreman's attention. "Hey, what happened to my bridge?" Foreman looked at Jake, his face neutral. "We were sent by the HOA to remove it. They said it was unsafe and not authorized." Jake felt a wave of disbelief wash over him. Unsafe? Not authorized? The bridge had been there for generations. How could this happen without any warning or discussion? Later that day, Jake called the HOA office and requested a meeting to understand the decision. His voice was calm but firm as he explained his connection to the bridge and the ranch. The HOA secretary replied that the board had voted on the removal due to concerns over liability and new community guidelines. They had sent letters, she said, but apparently Jake's address hadn't been updated in their records. Jake was stunned. He had never received any letter. No one had come to talk to him. The bridge was gone without a single conversation. Determined to resolve the issue, Jake marked his calendar for the next HOA meeting. He planned to attend, to speak up, and to ask for a fair solution. As the day of the meeting approached, Jake heard another surprising announcement from the HOA. They revealed plans to build a $5.5 million resort near BAI luxury retreat with spa facilities, tennis courts, and a golf course. The news stirred mixed feelings in the neighborhood. Some residents welcomed the potential boost to local business, while others worried about the changes it would bring. Jake was concerned not only about the resort's impact on the natural environment, but also about the timing. Could the removal of his bridge be related to the resort plans? Was this part of a larger change he hadn't been told about? At the meeting, the community hall buzzed with quiet conversations and curious looks. Jake listened as the HOA board members presented their plans and explained their decisions. When it was his turn to speak, Jake stood and looked around the room, his voice steady. "This ranch and that bridge are a part of my family's history," he said. "I understand the need for safety, but there was no communication, no chance to discuss or find alternatives. I ask that we work together to find a solution that respects everyone's interests." Some neighbors nodded in agreement, while others exchanged uneasy glances. The board promised to review Jake's concerns, but emphasized the importance of following regulations and community guidelines. Jake left the meeting with a mixture of hope and frustration. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, but he was determined to protect his ranch and the bridge that connected it to his life. Back at home, Jake stood at the creek's edge, staring at the empty space where the bridge had stood. Sun reflected off the water, sparkling like a promise. He clenched his jaw and made a silent vow. This was just the beginning. Jake woke early the next morning, the events of the HOA meeting still fresh in his mind. The room's quiet tension, replayed in his thoughts as he sipped his coffee on the porch overlooking the ranch. The missing bridge still weighed heavily on him, not just as a physical obstacle, but as a symbol of something deeper. He knew the bridge wasn't just a crossing over water. It was a link to years of family memories, countless walks with his father and afternoons spent watching the sun set over the fields. And now it was gone. Despite the disappointment, Jake was determined to understand the HOA's decision from every angle. He called the HOA office again, requesting access to the official documents and guidelines related to the bridge removal. The secretary sent over a package that included safety reports, community rules, and a notice about the new resort project. As Jake read through the papers, it became clear that the HOA was moving ahead with a grand plan. The $5.5 million resort would bring amenities like tennis courts, a swimming pool, and upscale lodging to the neighborhood. The brochures highlighted luxury, leisure, and the promise of increased property values. Jake wasn't opposed to growth or progress, but he couldn't shake a growing unease about how it was happening. His ranch bordered the land set aside for the resort, and the creek he relied on was fed by a dam near his property line. The dam controlled the flow of water essential to the local ecosystem and Jake's cattle. If the resort altered the creek or the dam's operation, it could impact his land in ways no one had fully explained. That afternoon, Jake decided to visit the dam. Walking down the dusty path toward the creek, he admired the quiet beauty of the water held back by the sturdy metal gates. He traced his fingers over the cool, rusted controls that regulated the flow. His mind raced with possibilities and concerns. Could the dam's operation be connected to the HOA's plans? Was it possible that the removal of his bridge was part of a larger effort to control access to the water or to influence the land? Jake made a mental note to learn more about the dam's management and who had authority over it. He felt a stirring of resolve. If the HOA was making moves that affected his ranch, he would need to be ready. That evening, Jake's neighbor Linda stopped by for a visit. She lived a few properties down and had raised a family on her own small farm. They had shared a friendly but quiet relationship over the years, mostly nodding hellos and occasional chats at the mailbox. Linda leaned on the porch railing and looked thoughtfully at the darkening sky. "I heard about the bridge," she said softly. "It must be tough." Jake nodded. "It is. But there's more going on than just the bridge, I think. The resort, the dam, it's all connected somehow." Linda sighed. "I've been worried, too. The resort sounds like a good idea on paper, but I'm not sure how it'll affect the water or our land. The creek feeds my garden, and I've seen some changes already." Jake smiled, grateful for the shared concern. "Maybe it's time we talk to others, see if more people have questions or worries. If we come together, we might find a way to protect what matters." Linda nodded in agreement. "I'm in." Over the next few days, Jake and Linda started reaching out quietly to other neighbors. At the local store, the post office, and casual meets, they listened to stories and concerns about the HOA's plans. Many people were curious, but hesitant, unsure how to speak up or where to start. Jake realized that his fight was not just about the bridge anymore. It was about ensuring that the neighborhood grew in a way that respected the land. And the people who lived there one afternoon, as Jake reviewed maps and property lines, he noticed a detail that caught his attention. The dam's control was key to the water flow that nourished the ranch and the land planned for the resort. Whoever managed the dam held significant influence. Jake felt a spark of determination. If he could learn to manage the dam carefully, he might have a way to protect his ranch and send a clear message about respecting his property with renewed purpose. Jake began planning his next steps. This wasn't just about fighting for what was lost. It was about shaping a future where the ranch and the neighborhood could coexist. As the days passed, Jake's thoughts returned again and again to the dam. That simple metal gate held more power than most people realized. It controlled the flow of water that shaped the landscape, nourished the pastures, and kept the creek alive. It was a vital part of the ranch, and Jake suspected a vital part of the resort plans. Late one evening, Jake sat at his kitchen table. Maps and documents spread before him, lit only by the soft glow of a desk lamp. He traced his finger along the lines marking the creek, the dam, his property, and the resort construction site just downstream. If the dam controls the water, then I hold a piece of the puzzle, Jake murmured to himself. He knew that water was more than a natural resource. It was life, power, and sometimes leverage. Jake's mind raced with ideas. He didn't want conflict for conflict's sake. He wanted fairness, respect, and a chance to protect the land that meant so much to him and his neighbors. The bridge removal had felt like a harsh message, a warning, but Jake wasn't ready to back down. Instead, he began to see the situation as a chance to encourage better communication and cooperation. His first step was to learn more about the dam's operation. Over the next few days, Jake visited the local water management office and spoke with officials. He asked about the dam's history, maintenance, and who had control over its gates. To his surprise, Jake discovered that while the HOA had administrative oversight over some water management policies, property owners like him, whose land bordered the creek and dam, retained certain rights. These rights included access to the dam controls in cases where water flow affected their land directly. Armed with this information, Jake realized he could safely operate the dam's release mechanism if necessary, an option that could influence the water levels downstream. Still, Jake was cautious. He didn't want to act rashly or cause unintended harm. Instead, he began reaching out to neighbors who might share his concerns. Linda was the first to offer her support. Together, they organized informal gatherings at their homes, inviting neighbors to discuss the changes happening in their community. At these meetings, conversations flowed easily. Some residents expressed excitement about the resort, hoping it would bring new opportunities. Others shared worries about water rights, environmental impact, and the sense of control slipping away from longtime landowners. Jake listened carefully, encouraging openness and collaboration. He didn't want to be seen as an adversary, but as someone seeking balance. One evening, during a particularly spirited discussion, a neighbor named Tom spoke up. If we can't trust the HOA to consider everyone's needs, maybe we need a way to remind them that the land and water belong to all of us. Jake nodded thoughtfully. Exactly. And with the dam, we have a way to ensure those needs aren't overlooked. With the group's encouragement, Jake began to draft a proposal for a community water management plan. The idea was to share responsibility and decisions fairly among landowners and the HOA, creating guidelines that protected both property and the natural environment. Meanwhile, Jake kept a close eye on the resort's construction. Progress was steady, but the land showed signs of strain. Heavy machinery churned the soil near the creek, and runoff stirred the water downstream. The delicate balance of the ecosystem was at risk. Jake felt a growing urgency. He wanted to give the HOA time to listen, but he also needed to be ready in case action was required to protect the ranch. Late one night, he sat on his porch, gazing at the dark water of the creek. The moon's reflection shimmered softly, and the gentle rush of the water was both calming and powerful. Jake thought of the bridge now beyond the dam's gates he could control. He understood the responsibility that came with that power. It wasn't about conflict or revenge. It was about stewardship and respect, about making sure the land and its people could thrive together. With a steady breath, Jake made his decision. He would prepare carefully, gathering support and information. When the time came, he would use his knowledge to protect the ranch and the community he loved. But for now, he waited, watching, listening and planning. Jake's quiet efforts to understand the situation and protect his ranch had begun to ripple through the neighborhood. What started as a personal concern was becoming a shared cause. The meetings he and Linda hosted grew in number and size, drawing in neighbors who wanted to learn more and have their voices heard. One sunny afternoon, Jake stood outside his barn, wiping sweat from his brow as he prepared for another gathering. The group was expected to meet in his spacious workshop, a place where plans could be discussed freely and ideas could flow without interruption. As neighbors arrived, the atmosphere was warm and welcoming. There were ranchers like Jake, longtime, residents like Linda, and even newer homeowners curious about the changes unfolding nearby. Over cups of coffee and homemade pastries, stories were shared, concerns about water levels, questions about the resort, and hopes for a future where the community could thrive together. Jake felt a deep sense of connection with the group. It was clear that while their backgrounds were different, their love for the land and the neighborhood united them. Linda took a moment to address the gathering. "We all want what's best for this place," she said. "But to get there, we need to understand what's happening and work together." Jake nodded. "That's why we're here. To share information, support each other, and find solutions." Of the neighbors, a young woman named Sarah spoke up. "I've been looking into the resort plans and environmental impact reports. Some of the details don't add up, especially around water management." Jake leaned forward, interested. "What do you mean?" Sarah pulled out a folder filled with papers. "The construction permits and water usage reports show some inconsistencies. It looks like the water flow from the dam may be redirected in ways that haven't been fully explained to the community." A murmur of concern passed through the group. Jake felt a mix of frustration and determination. Transparency was clearly lacking. "We need to gather all the facts," Jake said firmly. "If there are gaps or mistakes, we have to address them." Over the next few weeks, the group organized a small committee to investigate. They contacted environmental experts, reviewed public records, and documented changes in the creek and surrounding land. The more they learned, the clearer it became that the water management and construction plans were closely intertwined. Meanwhile, Jake continued to care for his ranch and maintain the dam controls. He approached the task with care and respect, understanding the responsibility it carried. One afternoon, while inspecting the dam, Jake was approached by a representative from the HOA. The woman introduced herself as Claire and spoke with a calm professionalism. "We're aware of your concerns, Jake," she said. "The board is reviewing the plans and wants to ensure the community's interests are considered." Jake appreciated her willingness to talk, but remained cautious. "I hope that means there's room for collaboration. We all want a neighborhood we're proud of." Claire nodded. "Absolutely. The resort project is important for growth, but so is respecting our landowners. I'll pass along your feedback." After she left, Jake felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this was the start of better communication back at the community meetings. The neighbors worked together to draft a list of shared goals: protecting the creek's health, ensuring fair access to water, preserving the natural landscape, and encouraging open dialogue between the HOA and residents. Linda summarized their intentions clearly. "We're not against progress," she said. "We want progress that respects our community." As summer edged closer, Jake noticed subtle changes around the ranch. The creek flowed steadily, the cattle grazed peacefully, and the fields bloomed with wildflowers. The neighborhood, despite its challenges, felt alive with potential. Yet Jake knew the balance was delicate. The resort's construction continued, and the stakes were rising. He looked out over the water, the sunlight sparkling on its surface like a promise. With the support of his neighbors and a clear plan in mind, Jake felt ready to face whatever came next. Together, they would protect their land and their community's future. As the summer days grew warmer, Jake felt the weight of responsibility settle firmly on his shoulders. The bridge was gone, the resort construction was moving forward, and the delicate balance of the creek and dam was more important than ever. But despite all the concerns and meetings, progress from the HOA was slow. Promises of dialogue felt distant, and Jake knew that if he wanted to protect his ranch and his neighbors' interests, he would have to take careful, decisive steps. Jake spent long hours reviewing the dam's mechanisms. He familiarized himself with every valve, every lever, and the way the water responded when the gates were opened or closed. His goal was clear: to understand the dam well enough to manage the flows safely and responsibly. The creek wasn't just a waterway. It was the lifeline of the ranch and many properties downstream. Too much water released too quickly could cause flooding, while too little could dry up pastures and harm local wildlife. Jake made notes, checked his equipment, and reached out to a few trusted neighbors for advice. Linda was a frequent visitor, and their conversations grew deeper, focused not just on what was happening, but on what they hoped to build together. One afternoon, Linda stopped by the ranch with fresh baked bread and news from the neighborhood. "Some folks are worried the resort will change everything," she said quietly. "Not just the creek, but the whole feel of the place." Jake nodded, appreciating her honesty. "That's why we have to be ready not just to protect the land, but to remind everyone that this is home for a lot of people." Together, they worked on drafting a clear, respectful letter to the HOA board, outlining their concerns about water management and the environmental impact of the resort project. They emphasized the need for transparency and a collaborative approach. But Jake also knew that words alone might not be enough. One evening, as the sun dipped low, he stood by the dam and watched the water pool behind the gates. The soft murmur of the creek was soothing, but there was a quiet urgency in the moment. If the HOA continued without proper regard for the creek and the land, the consequences could be serious. Jake's plan wasn't to cause trouble or harm, but to use the tools at his disposal to protect what mattered. He shared his intentions carefully with Linda and a small group of trusted neighbors. They understood the seriousness, but also the care with which Jake planned to act. "We're not looking for conflict," Linda said firmly. "We want fairness and respect." Jake agreed. "Exactly. If we must act, it will be thoughtfully and safely." Over the next several nights, Jake practiced operating the dam controls, carefully opening and closing the gates to observe how the water moved and responded. He took detailed notes and adjusted his approach to ensure the flow remained steady and manageable. He also kept a watchful eye on the resort construction site. Heavy machinery churned the earth near the creek's edge, and the scent of fresh-cut timber mingled with the summer air. The resort's progress was impressive. But Jake could see the fragile balance at risk. Erosion near the water's edge, and disturbed soil threatened to change the creek's natural course. Despite these concerns, Jake hoped there would be room for understanding. His goal was to encourage dialogue, not escalate tensions. Yet, in the back of his mind, he prepared for the possibility that a stronger action might be necessary to protect the ranch and community. Late one night, after checking the dam one final time, Jake sat quietly on the porch with his son, Alex, a calm and thoughtful teenager. Listened as Jake shared his plans. "Dad, I trust you," Alex said softly. "But promise me you'll be careful. We're all counting on you." Jake smiled, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "I will. This land is our home. I'll do everything I can to protect it, safely and wisely." Together, they looked out into the night, the stars reflected in the creek's gentle flow. It was a quiet moment of resolve and hope. Whatever came next, Jake knew he wasn't alone. With his family and neighbors beside him, he was ready to face the challenges ahead. The days that followed felt charged with quiet tension. The resort's construction site hummed steadily in the background. Heavy equipment moving earth and reshaping the land near the creek. Jake watched from his porch as piles of dirt grew and machinery rumbled, a stark contrast to the peaceful ranch that stretched beyond. Neighbors who had once been hesitant were now more vocal, gathering regularly at Jake's workshop to share updates and concerns. The community meetings had become a steady rhythm of conversation, support, and planning. But amidst the growing activity, Jake sensed that the HOA's response remained cautious, distant. Their letters promised review and consideration, but action was slow. For Jake and his neighbors, time was pressing. One afternoon, Jake received a call from Claire, the HOA representative who had reached out before. "Jake," she said, her tone serious but respectful. "The board has reviewed your group's concerns and the information you've provided." They want to arrange a meeting with you and some of the neighbors to discuss the water management and construction plans. Jake's heart lifted. This was the dialogue he had hoped for. "Thank you, Claire," he replied. "We look forward to working together." The meeting was scheduled for the following week at the community hall. Jake and Linda prepared carefully, gathering notes, reports, and suggestions to present. When the day arrived, the room was filled with familiar faces, neighbors, HOA board members, and a few consultants involved in the resort project. The atmosphere was serious but open. Claire opened the meeting. "We recognize the importance of this issue and want to ensure that the project proceeds responsibly, with respect for the land and all residents." Jake spoke next, his voice steady. "We appreciate that, and we want to collaborate to protect the creek, the dam, and our properties. The water is vital for all of us." He outlined the group's findings and concerns, emphasizing the need for a shared water management plan and greater transparency. The HOA consultants listened attentively and then shared their perspective. They explained the resort's water usage plans, safety measures, and environmental assessments. Some reassurances were offered, but Jake and his neighbors noticed that certain details remained vague. Linda raised a key point. "The construction has already altered the land near the creek. We need clear guarantees about erosion control and water flow management." Claire nodded. "Those concerns are valid. We will commit to increased monitoring and more frequent updates to the community." The discussion was constructive, but Jake knew the real test was yet to come, putting promises into practice as the meeting ended. Jake felt cautiously optimistic. The HOA had shown willingness to listen, and the neighbors had united around a common goal. Outside, the sun was dipping low, casting long shadows across the fields. Jake breathed deeply, appreciating the moment. But that night, as Jake checked the dam one last time before bed, he noticed something troubling. The water level behind the dam was rising faster than usual. He inspected the gates carefully and saw that one valve was partially stuck, limiting the release of water downstream. If left unchecked, the rising water could overflow, threatening both the ranch and the neighboring properties. Jake acted quickly, adjusting the controls to ease the pressure safely. He sent a message to Linda, alerting her to the situation and asking for her help in notifying neighbors. By early morning, word had spread through the community. Several neighbors came to assist Jake in monitoring the creek and the dam. Their teamwork prevented any damage, and Jake's careful handling of the situation earned the group's respect. The incident became a turning point. The HOA agreed to bring in specialists to inspect the dam and implement necessary repairs. They also committed to setting up a joint committee including residents to oversee water management. Jake's efforts, combined with the community's support, had made a tangible difference. Though challenges remained, the ranch and its neighbors had taken a vital step toward protecting their shared future. As Jake stood by the creek that evening, watching the water flow steadily through the open gates, he felt a renewed sense of hope. The land, the water, and the people were intertwined, and together they were stronger. The Joint Water Management Committee formed quickly after the dam incident, blending HOA representatives, neighbors like Jake and Linda, and water specialists. The group met regularly at the community hall. Each session focused on crafting fair, transparent guidelines for managing the creek, the dam, and the impact of the resort's construction. Jake found himself at the center of the discussions, his hands-on experience and steady approach earning respect from both sides. Yet balancing differing opinions was no easy task. Some HOA members pushed for more aggressive development plans, while several neighbors insisted that protecting the environment and existing properties had to come first. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Jake sat with Linda on the porch of his ranch, reflecting on the months of hard work. "I didn't expect this to get so complicated," Linda admitted, her gaze fixed on the distant treetops. "But it feels like We're finally being heard. Jake nodded thoughtfully. It's a start. But we have to stay vigilant. The resort is still under construction and some decisions could affect us for years. They shared a quiet moment, both aware of the delicate balance they needed to maintain between progress and preservation. Meanwhile, at the construction site, heavy machinery continued to reshape the landscape. Jake visited occasionally, watching the expansion with mixed feelings. He understood the potential benefits the resort could bring business, visitors, and opportunities to the area, but he also knew the land deserved respect. During one visit, Jake encountered a project manager named Mark. Their conversation was frank and professional. Jake, I know there's been tension, Mark said, but we want to minimize impact. We're installing erosion controls and we've adjusted some plans to protect the creek. Jake appreciated the effort but remained cautious. I'm glad to hear that. We all want the same thing, a thriving community that respects the land. At the ranch, Jake's son Alex grew more involved, attending committee meetings and helping with monitoring the creek. His youthful energy and thoughtful questions brought a fresh perspective. One afternoon, Alex approached Jake with a suggestion. Dad, maybe we could invite some of the resort staff to join our water monitoring team. It could build trust and help everyone understand what's happening. Jake smiled, impressed. That's a great idea, Alex. Building bridges, not walls. With that, the committee expanded its membership, bringing in voices from the resort project. Gradually, collaboration replaced suspicion. Despite these positive steps, challenges arose. One morning, Jake received a call from Linda, her voice urgent. The creek's water level dropped overnight, she reported. Some of the springs upstream might be blocked. Jake hurried to investigate. Walking the creek's edge, he noticed debris and silt buildup where the water should flow freely. It seemed the construction had altered some natural channels more than anticipated. Working with neighbors and committee members, Jake organized a cleanup effort. They cleared the debris carefully, restoring the water's flow. The task required time and coordination, but strengthened the community's bonds. The HOA board responded by approving additional environmental safeguards and regular inspections. The resort project managers committed to adjusting their work schedule to avoid sensitive times for local wildlife and water flow. At a community meeting soon after, Claire, the HOA representative, addressed the group. We've learned a lot from all of you. Collaboration is essential, and we're committed to making sure the project benefits everyone. Jake felt a surge of hope. Progress didn't have to come at the expense of the land or its people. With patience, respect, and teamwork, they could find balance. That evening, as the sun set in brilliant hues over the ranch, Jake stood by the creek with Alex and Linda. The water flowed steadily. Birdsong filled the air and the fields glowed. In the fading light, it was a moment of quiet triumph. Jake knew challenges still lay ahead, but with the community united, the land protected, and the future unfolding before them, he felt ready. They were standing firm, not just for the ranch or the resort, but for a shared home and a promise kept. Months had passed since the first cracks appeared in Jake's peaceful ranch life. The bridge was gone, the dam's waters had threatened, and the resort's construction reshaped the landscape. But now, standing on the porch of his home, Jake felt a sense of calm that had once seemed impossible. The collaborative water management committee had become a symbol of what the neighborhood could achieve when it worked together. Representatives from the HOA, ranchers, new homeowners, and resort staff met regularly, sharing updates, addressing concerns, and ensuring that the creek and dam were cared for responsibly. Jake looked out over the creek, the water flowing smoothly beneath the repaired dam gates. The fields were lush, the cattle grazing peacefully. The wildflowers blooming along the banks spoke of healing and balance. Alex joined him, his young face bright with the kind of hopeful energy only youth can carry. Dad, Alex said, I think we really made a difference? Jake smiled, pride warming his chest. We all did. It wasn't easy, but we stayed true to what mattered. Linda arrived shortly after, carrying fresh lemonade and a warm smile. The three of them sat together, the evening light casting a golden glow over the ranch. Linda spoke first. The resort is finished now, and it's already bringing visitors who respect the land. The HOA's been great about keeping us informed, and the water management plan is working well. Jake nodded. The key was listening to each other. Everyone had a role, and everyone's voice mattered. The resort, while modern and welcoming, had been thoughtfully designed to blend with the natural surroundings. Paths curved gently through the woods, wildlife corridors were preserved, and water-saving systems minimized impact on the creek. Jake had even been invited to give a tour, sharing the ranch's history and the story of the dam with guests curious about the land. At the community's annual picnic, held under a wide canopy of oak trees, neighbors celebrated not just the new resort, but the unity that had grown through the challenges. Claire, the HOA representative, raised a glass to respect, cooperation, and the future we're building together. Applause filled the air, mingling with laughter and music, as Jake watched the smiling faces around him. He thought back to that first day, the bridge's removal, the uncertainty, the moments of doubt. It had been a difficult journey, but the lessons were clear. Respect for the land and for each other was the foundation of a strong neighborhood. Power and progress could coexist with care and community. And sometimes standing firm wasn't about fighting, it was about listening, learning, and leading with heart. Later that night, Jake sat quietly on his porch with Alex by his side. The stars glittered overhead, reflected faintly in the creek's gentle flow. "Dad," Alex said softly, "what's next for the ranch?" Jake smiled, looking out at the land that had taught him so much. "We keep caring for it. We keep working together. And we keep making sure it's a place where everyone belongs." Alex nodded, content. The ranch was more than just land. It was home, a promise, and a shared story. And with that story, the neighborhood was ready to face whatever came next together.